Hi, my name's John LeMay, and welcome to my basement war room. Today I'm talking about how J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings is really a World War II metaphor that has inculcated the importance of preemptive war into the American public. So to do that, I'll give a little background on J.R.R. Tolkien, discuss how World War II inspired The Lord of the Rings, talk about the metaphor, then the education of the American public, and then I'll take any questions and comments you have. So please do write in questions and comments during this Facebook Live. And then finally, I'll conclude. Again, please comment. So a little background on J.R.R. Tolkien. John Ronald Reuel Tolkien was born in South Africa in 1892. He was orphaned in 1904, raised by a Catholic priest, or at least became a ward of a Catholic priest, and he remained faithful to his faith throughout his life. His grandson wrote about a little story where how at church Tolkien would kneel when everyone else was standing and would pray in Latin while everyone else was talking in English. So anyway, his faith was very important to him. Anyway, on July 15th, 1915, he was commissioned a second lieutenant in the 13th Reserve Battalion of the Lancashire Fusiliers and spent 11 months training in Staffordshire before deploying to France in early June 1916 as a signal officer with the 11th Service Battalion. On July 3rd, 1916, he fought in the futile assault on Fivepol Ridge. Then after that, also participated in the Battle of Byzantine Ridge from the July 14th to the 17th, and Ponsiers, and then finally, Ankh Heights. So these are all, and I apologize for my pronunciation there, but these are all parts of the Battle of the Somme. On October 27th, he came down with trench fever and was evacuated to England on the 8th of November and never returned to the war. So that was the end of the war for Tolkien after 4 hard months of fighting there at the Battle of the Somme. So the Lancashire Fusiliers lost 13,640 men during World War I. At the Battle of the Somme, the British lost 420,000 soldiers killed, missing, or wounded, of which Tolkien was one. So there's a little bit of background on World War I, and we'll come back to that quite a bit. Now, Tolkien published The Hobbit in 1937, published The Lord of the Rings in 1954, and died in 1973. Okay, so many have written about how World War I inspired The Lord of the Rings, and certainly there's a lot of truth to that. You can see the descriptions of Mordor as a description of the trench no man's land in World War I. But really, my argument here is that World War II was the major inspiration for Lord of the Rings because I believe that Tolkien had what we call today a whiskey tango foxtrot moment. So as World War II kicks off, he's sitting there and going, and this is me projecting, right? Putting myself in his shoes and sort of projecting. So he's sitting there as World War II kicks off and going, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. I fought the war to end all wars. I was there at the Battle of the Somme. I was covered in the blood of my dead and dying friends. I was seriously, what is going on? Why, after fighting the war to end all wars, are we fighting World War II? Why does my son have to join the Royal Air Force and fight to save Britain? And so he had a Whiskey Tango Foxtrot moment. It was like, what is going on here? A lot of cognitive dissonance there, I believe. I'm just projecting here. And that really inspired then The Lord of the Rings. So let's talk about some of the metaphors in The Lord of the Rings. Okay, the One Ring is World War I alliances. Let me read you the One Ring here. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in the halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the dark lord on his dark throne, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. So, how does an archduke getting assassinated equal the entire world going to war, right? Like, does that make any sense? That's crazy. So the One Ring, one ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and the darkness bind them. That is a metaphor for those World War I alliances. Okay, Isildar's failure to destroy the One Ring after Sauron is defeated in the Second Age. Well, that's the failure of the World War I peace. I mean, this great war was fought in the Second Age. The alliance of men and elves defeats the Dark Lord, and they keep the One Ring. Isildur keeps the One Ring, and then in the Third Age, the Lord of the Ring story comes about, and they have to fight Sauron again. So that is the failure of World War I to actually be the war that ended all wars, going into setting the seeds for World War II. Okay, Gondor and Rohan's corruption and inability to deal with Sauron's advances. That's the ineffective efforts of world leaders in the 1930s to stop Hitler, the appeasement as Hitler gobbles up Czechoslovakia and Poland. So Theoden being mind-controlled by Wormtongue. I mean, Wormtongue, really? Like, that is definitely, feels to me like a judgment on how the narratives that prevented people from dealing with the rise of Hitler. Denoth, influenced by Sauron's deceit, and then eventually losing one son and sending a son to die for no reason. Again, a good metaphor there. So Gondor standing alone against Sauron. Well, that's Britain stands alone against Hitler. Rohan finally comes to Gondor's aid. The United States finally coming to Britain's aid. The One Ring is destroyed at the end of the Lord of the Rings. So peace done correctly after World War II with complete occupations, with the creation of the United Nations to prevent another world war. So those are some of the metaphors that really stand out. But as you can see from a lot of those metaphors, it's not just the terrible battles of World War I, which many have written about, and I think are very evident, of course, in The Lord of the Rings. But it is the tension, that big question, like how did we ever fight World War I after World War II? So a lot of these metaphors are dealing with that failed peace and then the rise of World War II. Okay, education of the American public. So the great lesson of World War II is this preemptive war. And I'm not making a judgment and saying it's the best lesson or universally applicable, but a lot of historians and scholars and whatnot believe, like, hey, we intervened in World War I, but for what reason? Like, what on earth? Because World War II came about. Why did we appease Hitler for so long? Why didn't we take care of this before it became such a big problem? And so that's one of the great lessons of World War II is don't let Hitler gobble up all of Europe while you sit on your bum and do nothing. Like, intervene early, preemptive war. But I don't believe that it's high school history that has really inculcated that lesson into American culture, and that's why preemptive war resonates so well with Americans. Or, I argue, Tolkien. It's the Lord of the Rings. I mean, Tolkien's metaphor has engaged Americans much more effectively than high school or college history or anything along those lines. And so Americans don't want to be Theoden being mind-controlled by Wormtongue, right? They're like, hey, if there's a problem, we want to deal with it immediately. We want to take care of it and not sit back and wait to fight another world war. Another way of looking at it is we invested all this into World War I and then totally dropped the ball and had to reinvest all of this into World War II. Let's not totally drop the ball and wait for World War III to come along. So I think there is just, I guess, really Tolkien's narrative, his metaphor, has resonated with people in a way that dry history does not resonate. It's really, through the Lord of the Rings, spread that lesson in America. Okay, let me take a brief moment now to see if there's any questions or comments from all of y'all. I don't see any on my Facebook live feed. Let me just check another Facebook feed to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay. Well, I see a number of likes, but no questions or comments. So I'll go ahead and conclude then. So here at the Basement War Room, my mission is to educate the American public and to preserve the lessons of the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. In many ways, Tolkien is an inspiration because I think he was incredibly effective at preserving the lessons of World War I and World War II, the wars of his generation, through this great metaphor, the Lord of the Rings. In contrast, I believe we did not do a great job of preserving the lessons of Vietnam. Although many academics and scholars have written fantastic academic works on the Vietnam War, it's hard for me to see how those works had any impact on the conduct of the Afghanistan-Iraq War. While we did learn and preserve a few of those lessons, we repeated many of the mistakes of Vietnam in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. And so, we just didn't preserve it very well. Whereas in contrast, Tolkien has preserved the lessons of World War I and II, I think, very well through Lord of the Rings. In any case, if you'd like to join me in my mission to preserve the Iraq and Afghanistan lessons of those wars, please join the Facebook group, Lessons of the Afghanistan-Iraq Wars. And together, I think we can make some progress towards that end. Again, thank you very much for joining me for this live feed today.